License and registration.
Yes, officer. Take your time.
Here you are.
Just remain still for me. Where are you headed tonight, sir?
Blue lights cut through the Georgia dusk like a warning. A gray Honda Accord eased onto the shoulder of Highway 49, gravel crunching beneath its tires. The driver killed the engine and placed both hands on the steering wheel. He had learned this ritual decades ago. Keep your hands where they can see them. Move slow. Survive. The patrol car door swung open. Heavy boots hit the pavement. Deputy Vernon Skaggs adjusted his belt, took his time walking to the window. He enjoyed this part. The waiting, the watching, the way drivers squirmed when they saw him coming. He tapped the glass with his flashlight. The window rolled down. License and registration. The driver reached for his wallet. Slow, deliberate. He handed over both documents without a word. Skaggs studied the license longer than necessary. Terrence Booker, Atlanta address, 54 years old. He shined his flashlight directly into the man's face, watching for a flinch. The driver didn't blink. Where you coming from? Visiting my mother, assisted living facility in Macon. Where you headed? Home, Atlanta. This your car? Yes, sir. Registration's right there in your hand. Skaggs didn't like the answer. Too calm, too prepared. In his experience, people with nothing to hide still acted nervous. This man acted like he had done this before, like he expected it. He leaned into the window close enough that Terry could smell the coffee on his breath. The body camera clipped to his chest recorded everything. Every word, every inflection, every mistake. You people always got an answer for everything. Skaggs let the words hang in the air. Step out of the vehicle. Terry opened the door slowly. He planted his feet on the asphalt and stood with his hands visible at his sides. The evening air carried the scent of pine and exhaust. Cars whipped past on the highway, their headlights briefly illuminating the scene before disappearing into the darkness. Turn around, hands on the car. Terry complied. His palms pressed against the warm metal of the hood. He felt Skaggs' hands pat down his sides, his legs, his pockets, finding nothing. I'm going to search your vehicle. I don't consent to a search. I don't need your consent. I smell marijuana. There was no marijuana. There had never been marijuana. Terry hadn't touched the substance in his entire life, but he understood what was happening. He had seen this script play out in courtrooms for 15 years. The fabricated probable cause, the fishing expedition, the humiliation dressed up as procedure. Skaggs opened the driver's door and began pulling items from the center console. Papers scattered across the seat. He moved to the back, yanking out a duffel bag and dumping its contents onto the highway shoulder. Legal briefs spilled across the gravel. A leather Bible, worn soft from decades of use, landed spine first on the asphalt. Photographs fluttered in the wind from passing trucks. Terry watched his father's Bible lying in the dirt and something cold settled into his chest. Not anger, recognition. He had seen this before. In Iraq, interrogators used humiliation to break men. They stripped away dignity piece by piece until nothing remained but compliance. Skaggs was running the same operation, and he didn't even know it. Terry memorized everything, the time on his watch, the position of the body camera, the exact words Skaggs had used. He filed each detail away like evidence, because that's exactly what it was. Minutes passed. Skaggs found nothing. No drugs, no weapons, no warrants. Nothing but the belongings of a man driving home from visiting his elderly mother. But Skaggs wasn't finished. He keyed his radio and called for backup. His voice carried the casual authority of a man who had never faced consequences. Unit 7 requesting assistance on Highway 49. Driver acting erratic. Possible intoxication. The lie was recorded, preserved, permanent. Terry stood on that highway shoulder as the sun dropped below the tree line. He had survived 2 tours in Iraq. He had argued cases before appellate courts that decided the fate of thousands. He had sent corrupt men to prison and freed innocent ones. None of that mattered right now. Right now, he was just another black man on the side of the road, waiting to see what would happen next. What Deputy Vernon Skaggs didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have known, was that the man he had just humiliated wasn't a suspect. He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't even an ordinary citizen. He was Judge Terrence Booker, federal judge for the Northern District of Georgia, and in 18 months, this traffic stop would cost Crenshaw County $18.4 million. But the reckoning wasn't coming from anger. It was coming from patience, and Vernon Skaggs had just made the worst mistake of his career. What would you have done if you were standing on that highway shoulder, watching everything you owned get dumped in the dirt? Pritchard, Alabama taught its children certain lessons before they could read. Keep your voice low in public. Don't run in white neighborhoods. Never reach for anything a police officer can't see. Terrence Booker learned these lessons in a shotgun house on Whistler Street, where the paint peeled in summer and the pipes froze every January. His mother worked double shifts at the textile mill. His father came home from Korea with a Purple Heart pinned to his chest and a leg that would never bend right again. The military gave Roosevelt Booker medals. America gave him a segregated hospital ward where black veterans waited in hallways while white soldiers recovered in private rooms. When he finally healed enough to walk, the only job he could find was pushing a mop at Pritchard High School. For 23 years, Terry watched his father limp to work before sunrise. Roosevelt never complained, never raised his voice about the injustice, never explained to his son why a man who took shrapnel for his country spent his days cleaning toilets for teenagers who would never know his name. But Terry understood anyway. He watched, he absorbed, and something permanent carved itself into his chest, a hunger that would define everything that followed. At 18, Terry enlisted in the Marine Corps. His mother cried at the bus station. His father shook his hand once, firm and brief, and said 4 words that would echo through every firefight, every courtroom, every moment of crisis for the next 36 years. Make it mean something. Boot camp at Paris Island stripped away everything soft. Iraq stripped away everything else. Terry served 2 tours in Fallujah and Ramadi, moving through streets where death lived in every doorway. He learned to read a room in half a second. He learned that hesitation killed faster than bullets. He earned a Bronze Star for pulling 3 wounded Marines from a burning vehicle while enemy rounds tore the air around him. He also earned shrapnel scars across his left shoulder and nightmares that visited like clockwork every 3rd night. Dreams of dust and blood and the faces of men who didn't make it home. Terry returned stateside with 2 things most veterans struggled to find: purpose and a weapon. The weapon wasn't a rifle, it was the GI Bill. Howard University School of Law accepted him in the fall of 2001. He arrived on campus 3 weeks before the towers fell and spent the next 3 years watching his country change while he studied torts and constitutional law. His classmates saw a quiet veteran who sat in the front row and never missed an assignment. His professors saw something sharper, a mind that dissected arguments the way a surgeon dissected tissue. Precise, relentless, unsparing. He graduated top of his class. The job offers came flooding in: corporate firms, government positions, prestigious clerkships. Terry turned them all down. He had watched his father clean floors for men who would never respect him. He had no intention of doing the same in a suit. Instead, he joined a civil rights firm in Atlanta that operated out of a converted warehouse. The pay was modest. The hours were brutal. The cases were impossible. Terry won anyway. 15 years of litigation. Exposed a predatory lending scheme that had stolen homes from 300 black families in Clayton County. Sent a corrupt county commissioner to federal prison for taking bribes from developers who wanted to bulldoze a historic black neighborhood. argued before the 11th Circuit 7 times and won 6. His reputation grew, not for flash, not for courtroom theatrics, for preparation. Every case he touched arrived at trial with evidence so meticulously organized that opposing counsel knew they were beaten before opening statements. Judges trusted his word, juries believed his witnesses, and the people he represented, the ones the system had forgotten, finally had someone fighting for them. At 47, the call came from Washington. A federal judgeship had opened in the Northern District of Georgia. The president wanted to nominate him. Terry thought about his father, the medals collecting dust in a shoebox, the mop and bucket, the silence. He accepted the nomination. For 7 years, Judge Terrence Booker presided over cases that shaped the Southeast. His rulings were airtight. His integrity was unquestioned. Lawyers who appeared before him knew the same truth that Terry had carried since Pritchard. Preparation wins. Patience wins. The law, applied correctly, is the great equalizer. He believed that with everything he had. And on March 14th, standing on the shoulder of Highway 49 while a deputy dumped his father's Bible in the dirt, he would have the chance to prove it. 2 tours in Iraq, a Bronze Star, 15 years of civil rights litigation, a federal judgeship. None of it protected him from the blue lights in his mirror, but all of it prepared him for what came next. Vernon Skaggs thought he had pulled over a suspect. He had pulled over a witness, and that witness had spent his entire life preparing for exactly this moment. How do you think Terry's military training helped him stay calm during those 17 minutes on the highway? Vernon Skaggs grew up in a house where the badge hung on the wall like a family crest. His grandfather wore it. His father wore it. And from the time Vernon could walk, he understood that the uniform wasn't just clothing. It was inheritance. The Skaggs family had policed Crenshaw County for 3 generations. They knew every back road, every hunting cabin, every family that mattered. They also knew which families didn't matter, which faces belonged and which ones raised suspicion simply by existing. Vernon absorbed these lessons the way children absorb language, without questioning, without examining. By the time he graduated high school, the shape of his future was already fixed. He would wear the badge. He would carry the authority. He would continue what his grandfather started. The police academy nearly derailed everything. Vernon struggled with the written exams. The legal portions confused him. Constitutional law, probable cause, use of force continuums. The concepts slid off his mind like water off glass. He graduated in the bottom third of his class, squeaking through on physical fitness scores and a family name that still meant something to the instructors. But graduation was graduation. The badge was the badge. And once Vernon pinned it to his chest, the test scores stopped mattering. 12 years on the Crenshaw County Sheriff's Department taught Vernon his own lessons. He learned that paperwork could be adjusted. He learned that witnesses rarely came forward. He learned that complaints from certain neighborhoods carried less weight than complaints from others. Most importantly, he learned that he was untouchable. His fellow deputies called him the Hound. They meant it as a compliment. Vernon had a gift for finding people. He would run plates on vehicles that caught his attention, fishing for warrants, expired registrations, anything that justified a stop. He called it proactive policing, initiative, good instincts. The community called it something else. In 18 months, Vernon Skaggs conducted 847 traffic stops. 73% of those stops involved black drivers. Crenshaw County's population was only 31% black. The math was damning. The department didn't care. 9 internal complaints accumulated in Vernon's personnel file over 12 years. Different victims, different dates, same pattern. A young mother named Keisha Trent, detained for 47 minutes on a Tuesday afternoon while her 3-year-old screamed in the backseat. Vernon claimed she matched the description of a robbery suspect. The suspect was 5'2". Keisha was 5'9". The complaint was dismissed due to insufficient evidence. A pastor named Reverend Otis Caldwell pulled over 3 times in a single month. Each time, Vernon claimed a busted tail light. Each time, the tail light was functioning. Each time, the Reverend filed a complaint. Each time, supervisors noted that Deputy Skaggs was simply being thorough. A college student named Darnell Washington, Jr. stopped for driving a suspicious vehicle. The vehicle was a brand new Lexus, a graduation gift from his grandmother. Vernon detained him for 2 hours, waiting for drug dogs that never found anything. The complaint was dismissed after Vernon submitted paperwork claiming the student had been uncooperative. 9 complaints, 9 different citizens, 9 opportunities for the department to recognize a pattern. 9 times they looked the other way. The body camera was supposed to change everything: accountability, transparency, protection for officers and civilians alike. Vernon understood the technology differently, in 3 separate excessive force complaints. His body camera had been malfunctioning, turned off by accident, bumped loose during a struggle, memory card corrupted. 3 times the footage disappeared. 3 times Vernon walked without consequences. 3 times he learned the same lesson his family had taught him since childhood: the badge protected its own. Sheriff Floyd Purnell received the complaints and filed them away. He had known Vernon's father. He had worked alongside Vernon's grandfather. The Skaggs family was part of Crenshaw County's foundation. You didn't tear down foundations. You reinforced them. Training was recommended. Counseling was suggested. Accountability was avoided. Vernon took each dismissed complaint as confirmation. His instincts were correct. His methods were justified. And anyone who complained was simply someone who had something to hide. He believed this completely on the evening of March 14th. He believed it when he spotted the gray Honda Accord driving north on Highway 49. He believed it when he ran the plates and found nothing but pulled the car over anyway. He believed it right up until backup arrived. Right up until Deputy Darnell Simmons stepped out of his cruiser, looked at the man standing beside the Accord, and went pale. Simmons was younger, newer. He hadn't grown up with the Skaggs family mythology. He had grown up watching the news, seeing what happened when traffic stops went wrong, recognizing faces that appeared on courthouse steps and evening broadcasts. "Skaggs," his voice cracked. "That's Judge Booker, federal judge, Northern District." For 3 seconds, the body camera captured something it had never recorded before. Fear. Genuine fear flickering across Vernon Skaggs' face like a candle in wind. Then arrogance returned. The inheritance kicked in. The badge reasserted itself. "I don't care if he's the president." He matched a description. But there was no description, no bulletin, no call from dispatch, nothing except Vernon's instincts. The same instincts that had guided 846 previous stops, the same instincts that had never failed him. Until now. Deputy Darnell Simmons would remember this moment. He would replay it in his mind during sleepless nights. And 18 months later, he would repeat it under oath, in a federal courtroom, while Vernon Skaggs sat at the defendant's table watching his entire life collapse. The hound had spent 12 years hunting without consequences. But on Highway 49, he made a mistake that training couldn't fix and family connections couldn't bury. He stopped a man who knew exactly how the system worked, and that man was about to use every piece of it. After learning about Deputy Skaggs' history, do you think the problem was the individual officer or the system that protected him for 12 years? 17 minutes. That's how long Judge Terrence Booker stood on the shoulder of Highway 49. 17 minutes that would be measured in seconds during testimony. 17 minutes that would cost a deputy his career, a sheriff his election, and a county $18.4 million. The body camera captured everything. Terry stood with his palms pressed against the hood of his Accord while Deputy Skaggs emptied the trunk. a suitcase filled with clothes for an overnight visit, a cooler containing sandwiches his mother had insisted he take, legal documents from cases he had been reviewing during his stay. Each item hit the ground with deliberate force. Skaggs wasn't searching, he was punishing. Lot of paperwork for someone just visiting his mama. Terry said nothing. He had learned silence in places far more dangerous than this highway shoulder. In Fallujah, he had waited motionless for 6 hours while enemy fighters swept a building 3 meters from his position. 17 minutes was nothing. But watching his father's Bible land face down in the gravel tested something deeper than patience. Roosevelt Booker had carried that Bible through Korea. He had read from it every Sunday morning at the kitchen table in Pritchard, his damaged leg stretched out beneath the chair, his voice steady and certain. When Terry deployed to Iraq, his father pressed the worn leather into his hands and said nothing. The gesture said everything. Now it lay in the dirt beside Highway 49, pages fluttering in the wind from passing trucks. Terry memorized the moment, the angle of the setting sun, the license plate of the patrol car, the exact position of the body camera on Skaggs' chest. He was building a case in real time, cataloging evidence the way he had cataloged enemy positions in combat. Deputy Darnell Simmons arrived at minute 11. His cruiser pulled onto the shoulder, and he stepped out with the casual posture of routine backup. Then he looked at the man standing beside the Accord. His posture changed instantly. Simmons had seen Judge Booker on television. He had read about the Clayton County lending case in the newspaper. He knew exactly who was standing on that highway shoulder with his belongings scattered in the gravel. Skaggs, the word came out strangled. That's Judge Booker, federal judge, Northern District. The body camera recorded what happened next. Vernon Skaggs turned slowly. For 3 seconds, something crossed his face that the footage would later make famous. Fear. Pure, undiluted fear. The expression of a man who had just realized he was standing in the middle of his own destruction. Then the mask returned. I don't care if he's the president. He matched a description. Simmons shook his head. There's no description, Vernon. I was on dispatch all afternoon. There's nothing. Then someone called it in before your shift. Nobody called anything in. I checked. Terry watched this exchange without speaking. He watched Skaggs' jaw tighten. He watched Simmons take a step back, physically distancing himself from what was happening. He watched the body camera recording every word, every gesture, every lie. Skaggs made his decision. He couldn't admit the mistake. Admitting the mistake meant admitting everything. The 846 other stops, the pattern, the truth. Sir, you're free to go. The words came out clipped, mechanical. This was a routine stop, no further action required. Terry bent down and picked up his father's Bible. He brushed the dirt from its cover with careful hands. Then he gathered the rest of his belongings, piece by piece, and placed them back in his vehicle. He didn't raise his voice, didn't demand badge numbers or threaten lawsuits, didn't give Skaggs anything that could be twisted into aggression or resistance. He simply looked at Deputy Darnell Simmons and spoke 5 words. I'll need your testimony, Deputy. Simmons nodded once. He understood what he had witnessed. He understood what it meant. And 18 months later, he would sit in a federal courtroom and repeat everything he saw, everything he heard, everything he knew. Terry drove away from Highway 49 as darkness settled over Georgia. His hands were steady on the wheel. His breathing was even, but something had shifted in his chest. For 36 years, he had believed the law could correct injustice. For 17 minutes, he had experienced what happened when the law failed. Now he would prove what happened when someone who understood the law refused to let that failure stand. Vernon Skaggs thought the stop was over. He thought letting the judge go fix the problem. He thought his family name and his badge and his 12 years of protection would keep him safe. He was wrong. The stop wasn't the end. It was the beginning. and everything Vernon Skaggs had built was about to collapse. What do you think was going through Deputy Simmons' mind when he realized he would have to testify against a fellow officer? The lawsuit landed on Crenshaw County's desk like a bomb. 3 defendants named in bold black letters. Deputy Vernon Skaggs, individually, for violation of civil rights under color of law. Sheriff Floyd Purnell, for failure to supervise and deliberate indifference to a pattern of misconduct. Crenshaw County itself, for maintaining policies and practices that enabled racial profiling. The complaint ran 47 pages, every traffic stop documented, every complaint cataloged, every dismissed investigation examined and exposed. Judge Terrence Booker hadn't just filed a lawsuit, he had assembled an autopsy of institutional failure. Crenshaw County's attorneys reviewed the evidence and immediately requested a settlement conference. They offered $2 million, quiet, confidential, no admission of wrongdoing. Terry refused. They came back with $4 million, same conditions, sealed records, no public verdict. Terry refused again. His attorney, a former student named Claudette Merriweather who had clerked in his courtroom years earlier, asked him why he kept turning down the money. Because settlements disappear, Terry told her. Verdicts don't. I want a record, something that can't be buried or sealed or forgotten, something that forces them to admit what they did. The trial began on a Tuesday morning in October. The federal courthouse in Atlanta filled with reporters, civil rights advocates, and citizens who had driven hours to witness what happened when power faced accountability. Deputy Darnell Simmons took the stand on day 3. His hands trembled as he raised them for the oath. He had received threats, anonymous calls, notes left on his windshield, the blue wall of silence pressed against him from every direction. He testified anyway. There was no description, he told the jury, no bulletin, no call from dispatch. I checked the logs myself. Deputy Skaggs made that stop based on nothing but his own judgment. The body camera footage played next. 12 jurors watched Vernon Skaggs lean into the window of a gray Honda Accord and speak 6 words that would define the trial. You people always got an answer for everything. The courtroom went silent. Those words hung in the air like smoke. No context could soften them. No explanation could erase them. Vernon Skaggs sat at the defendant's table, watching his career end in high definition. The defense argued procedure, training deficiencies, lack of clear policy. They tried to shift blame to the institution, away from the individual. But the jury had seen the footage. They had heard the words. They had watched a decorated federal judge stand on a highway shoulder while his belongings were dumped in the dirt. 4 hours of deliberation. 4 hours to weigh 12 years of complaints against 17 minutes of footage, against a lifetime of service. The verdict came back unanimous. $18.4 million. $6 million in compensatory damages for the humiliation, the emotional distress, the violation of constitutional rights. $12.4 million in punitive damages. A message from 12 ordinary citizens that some conduct was beyond excuse, beyond training, beyond institutional protection. Vernon Skaggs was terminated the following week. His peace officer certification was revoked permanently. He would never wear a badge again. Sheriff Floyd Purnell lost his re-election bid by 19 points, the largest margin of defeat in Crenshaw County history. Voters remembered. Voters held him accountable when the system wouldn't. And Judge Terrence Booker returned to his bench in the Northern District of Georgia. Same courtroom, same robes, same purpose. The man who had stood on Highway 49 with his hands visible and his dignity intact now continued the work his father's sacrifice had made possible. The money went to a foundation, scholarships for first-generation law students, legal defense funds for citizens who couldn't afford representation. The settlement that Crenshaw County had tried to bury became seeds planted across Georgia. Sometimes the system fails. Sometimes it fails the very people who dedicated their lives to making it work. But sometimes those people refuse to accept the failure. They document it. They expose it. They transform it into something that protects others. Dignity isn't given by badges or titles or uniforms. It's carried. It's inherited from fathers who limped to work without complaint. It's forged in boot camps and firefights and courtrooms where the odds seem impossible. Vernon Skaggs thought he stopped a suspect that evening. He stopped a judge, a veteran, a son who remembered his father's silence and chose to speak. And that voice echoed through a federal courtroom, through a verdict, through a county that would never be the same. Accountability doesn't come from anger. It comes from patience, from preparation, from an unshakable belief that truth eventually wins. And on Highway 49, truth won. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another video. We bring you stories like this every week. Stories of courage, stories of justice, stories that remind us what's possible when ordinary people refuse to stay silent. Drop a comment below and tell us what you think. Have you ever witnessed something that demanded accountability? Share your story. Your words might inspire someone else to speak up. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share this video. Justice doesn't spread itself. People do. Until next time, stay strong, stay prepared, and never forget that the truth has a way of finding the light.